So today's reading vlog is trying to finish up the books that I have on my TBR from last year. So a good majority of the books that I currently own on my physical TBR, I purchased this year. Minus the Shadowhunters books that I will be continuing to read throughout the year, which I did purchase a lot of those at the end of last year just so that I had them for this year. These next 4 books are the only books I have remaining on my TBR, physical TBR, that I purchased last year. Everything else, 2024. So let me go through them really quick, and I'm just gonna read them throughout the week to get them off my TBR so that everything is like new and fresh for the most part. The first book I'm starting with is Imagine Me from the Shatter Me series by Tahar Mafi. This is the final book in that series. And for the most part, I have been reading these throughout my series vlogs, and this will be the only one that's like outside of that, I believe. I may have read one that wasn't in it, but very excited to finish up this series, to see where this goes, how it ends, how Juliet's story wraps up. I freaking just love those covers too, like all the different like eyeballs. Love it. I have one book of the month that's still from last year, and that's When I'm Dead by Hannah Morrissey. Don't know too much about this. It just says one girl murdered, another missing, and a medical examiner desperately searching for the truth. So I have I've enjoyed all of the thrillers that I've got from book of the month. There's not been one that I got that I didn't like. There's been some I've liked more than others, but this will be the only book of the month I have remaining from last year, so I'm excited to get that off my list. Love It's Complicated by Janine Collette. This book actually came to me like early January. It was the Romance Reveal Box book that I got at the beginning of the year, so it's the oldest one I have, so I'm going to be getting that off my TBR as well. And I'm not sure actually what this is about. So it's a divorced single mother who is kind of in a tailspin. Her life's in a tailspin. She ended up spending a night in jail and meets this sexy police officer who ends up being her knight in shining armor. And then she shows up to work the next day. So she's a wedding planner, shows up to work the next day finding out that she is in charge of planning his fairy tale wedding to someone else. Well, this is going to be complicated. So we'll see. The writing in this book is so tiny. Like, it's not a lot of pages, but the font is so small. And then I'm gonna finish up with Veronica Roth's Chosen Ones. Veronica Roth is the author of the Divergent series. I picked this book up at Ollie's, I wanna say like early summer last year, so I've had it on my TBR for about a year. I'm very excited to read this. It's again about like gifted kids in this like kind of a dystopian type world where they're trying to defeat this Dark Lord, but nothing is what it seems, and now they're super famous because of the role they had, I guess, in the demise of that person. So I think one of them ends up dying, and then things have to like work themselves out from there. I don't know. I don't remember exactly what it said, but I've got a fantasy, a romance, a thriller, and a dystopian. So it worked out that I had 4 different genres, so it will not get old, but very excited to get these books off my TBR. So once I start Imagine Me and have some type of feelings to share about it, I will check back in with all of you. All right, so first update for Imagine Me. It is now the next day, so it's Tuesday, not that it matters, but I just started this today because I was still finishing up another book this morning, so I started this at lunch, and I'm about 160 pages in, 30% roughly, like a third of the way of the book. And this started off like very chaotic. There was a lot going on. You're kind of in people's heads more than there's like actual dialogue, so you're getting the perspective of what's going on from like somebody having a conversation, not a conversation with themselves, but thoughts in their head. And there was just like a lot of chaos going on at the beginning of this book, and it hasn't really let up for like not much happening in the last 2 books. Like this book's made up for it already in the first 160 pages, but it's almost too much. Like all this stuff is trying to be crammed into this final book. And then there's like these weird time hops where I'm not really sure like how somebody got from like where they were to like Juliet hops from like the last time you know where she is, like the next time you get into her perspective, all of a sudden she's like somewhere else and you have no idea how she got there. So it's a little weird, but I had a feeling this book was going to be a little bit of chaos because of how not slow, but how little really happened in the last 2 books. It was more building the storyline, I think. But I didn't really expect it to be this chaotic. So we'll see what the last 200 so pages of the book, little under 300 pages left of the book, really give us. It's not bad, it's just there's a lot of chaos happening. So I'm gonna keep reading and I'll update y'all when I get further. All right, so update. I meant to update this morning before I left for work and I just completely forgot. So that's on me. But I finished Imagine Me. I read these books really fast. I read this book in like maybe 3 hours. So that's why I kind of forgot to update again. I enjoyed this as the final book in this series. It had a lot going on at the beginning, like I said, but then the end, like I was very frustrated because like the conclusion was like this much of the book. It just happened so fast. Like all this build up, and then done. The epilogue was longer than the conclusion of the book, but whatever. It's still a fun, good ending to this series. I would recommend this. It was not a 5-star series for me by any means, but very enjoyable series. Very happy that I read it, but it will not be like a top series that I look back on super fondly. I could possibly reread this at some point too, just because I do read them so fast, but it was a fun dystopian series. That's all I can really say. Now I'm going to move on to When I'm Dead by Hannah Morrissey. I don't know much about this. I don't want to know much about this. So once I've read enough to figure out what's kind of going on, then I will share. But I don't like to look too much into what's going on in a thriller until I start reading it. So let me get somewhere in this book and then I will update again. Hey everyone, it's the next day now. And I'm just over halfway through, what is this book? When I'm Dead. And this book's really dark. Like, I've got quite a few thriller mystery books from Book of the Month, but this one's really, really dark. There's a lot of like, obviously death themes and stuff. It's called When I'm Dead, so I shouldn't be that surprised, but it seems like there's depression in this a lot, and I don't know that I like exactly how it's being portrayed. It's not that it's inaccurate, I just don't know that I like how it's being discussed. And there's some other like themes about like being overweight and like what that means socially and stuff that I'm not a huge fan of. But the story is very interesting. Like I really want to know what happened. I think I know what happened. We'll find out when I get to the end of the book, obviously. And if it is what I think, then the author made it pretty dang obvious at one point, at least to me. So we'll see when I get towards the end if I'm right. But basically we're following this couple. The wife's a medical examiner. Her name's Rowan, and then the husband's name is Axel. I wanted to call him Alec. Axel. He's a detective, and begins with them investigating the murder of their daughter's best friend, who was found dead. Like, yeah, okay, that says it in the front. I hadn't read the inside. They are investigating the death of their daughter's best friend, and then right after that happens, she can't get a hold of her daughter because she was at a play that she was in, that they had to leave early for this. And she panics and she goes home and their daughter's missing, also in the front flap. So that's not a spoiler. From there, more stuff just keeps happening, and her and her husband are kind of split on what they think happened, or whether or not they think their daughter's still alive, or if she was involved in these weird goings on, and they're just handling it very poorly together. They're not really handling it as a pair, they're kind of handling it separately. But, I mean, that can happen. That's probably pretty realistic with what they're being told on their own ends, and just like in their minds what they think and what they think about their daughter and what they're hoping for. So I can understand that. But very dark themes. We're also following the next door neighbor, Libby, who is also their daughter Chloe's age. I think those are the only POVs that we've got. There's 3, I think. So far, there's 3. But it's interesting. I really do want to know what happened. Like I said, I think I know, but it's like gripping enough that it keeps going, and there's enough like ambiguity of what's going on for me to question if I'm right or not. So I will probably, hopefully finish this tonight, because I do just kind of want to get done with, because it is kind of, some of the content is bothering me a little bit. Not that I don't want to read it, it's just like mentally I don't like to read stuff like that. So I'm trying to get through this as fast as I can. And if I do, we'll move on to the next book, but I will update you all when I'm done. Okay, so I finished When I'm Dead, and I was right about the murderer, but I feel like there were a lot of plot holes in this book for how that became like the actual part of the story. I think the author was dropping a lot of clues that that's who it would be, but when it came out to be why they did what they did, I think there were a lot of plot holes. So not sure I loved this book. It wasn't terrible, but I could easily tell who did it, and I just feel like there was a lot that was left unanswered. So that one's done. Now I'm going to read Love It's Complicated by Janine Collette. I'm not sure what I'm going to think about this one either, because it seems like at the beginning of the book, the male love interest he's engaged because I don't know any of their names because they're not on the back, but she's going to help him plan his wedding to somebody else. So I'm not sure. I'm hoping there's not a cheating trope, because that's not my cup of tea, but we'll see. I'm going to read it and we'll find out, I guess. So gonna start this. Not gonna probably get very far this evening just because it's already like the time that I usually go to bed. But I'm gonna try to read a little bit just to get started, and I'll catch up with you guys tomorrow. Love It's Complicated update. I'm about 100 pages in, and I didn't love how it started off because it is about a guy that is engaged meeting this girl because he's a cop and she gets arrested for doing something stupid. Girl, she's a woman, she's a mom. And there's like instant attraction between them. She feels it, he feels it. She's still going through some rough times because of her divorce and what happened with that, and dealing with her kids and everything. And they meet because she gets arrested, and then they kind of run into each other again. And then she is like a wedding designer, not a planner, but like a wedding designer. And his fiance asks her to design their wedding, and she's like not aware that he was engaged at all because he didn't tell her. So that was like a rude awakening. I can't really say anything else without giving away like the part of the, I mean, it's a romance between the two of them, so you can draw conclusions, but he's basically trying to apologize and like get back on her good side after not being honest about the fact that he was in a relationship and he was engaged. So that's where I am right now. It's like a third of the way through the book. This book's like less than 300 pages, so I'm just gonna sit down and try to crank out as much of this as I can. So I just finished up Love It's Complicated, and it was okay. Not my favorite like trope. I don't like when family dynamics get too involved in romances. That's just not for me, because it's just not where I am in my life, I guess, and it's not really what like is appealing to me. So like it was single mom, like divorced mom situation, but like her husband was still involved, or her ex-husband was still involved too, so it just got really messy. And the romance was cute, but the like side stuff was kind of took away from the story for me. But anyway, that one's done. So on to the last book for the vlog, which is Veronica Roth's Chosen Ones. And this is like a dystopian fantasy novel about a bunch of like teenagers who saved the world from the Dark One. Yeah. And now it's like years later, and they're finding out that there was like more to his plot and his plans than they originally thought. And one of them dies, I think, and now they have to like figure out another what's going on kind of thing. I don't know. The 10th anniversary, one of them dies. Okay, that's all I got. So I'm gonna start this, see where I get tonight, and then I will update when I have a little bit better of an idea of what's going on. Hey everyone, update on the Chosen Ones. First of all, I love when I take the dust jacket off a book and it's like beautiful underneath. You can't really see, I don't think, but like the book itself is actually textured, and then it has the design. But anyway, I'm about a third of the way, just under a third of the way through the book, and it's way more interesting than I thought it was gonna be. I really didn't know how I was gonna feel about this. It's definitely more fantasy than dystopian, which was like what the Divergent series I'd say was more like. But this follows 5 chosen ones. So there was this dark one that did this, I think like they call his magic the Drain, and he was basically like mass murdering people, like not hundreds of that, like tens of thousands of people at a time in different parts of the United States. And that's what it kind of opens. And this is a little bit of mixed media, so there's like news stories and stuff like that in it, and there's also like transcriptions from government pages about these chosen ones and stuff. So there's like stuff like that. So these 5 chosen ones were chosen to help defeat the Dark One because of a prophecy that they all technically were the answer to, but they didn't really know like which one was going to be the chosen one. And there was like these magical artifacts, and they all had one that they had to go like retrieve to possibly help with this. We're now like 10 years after the defeat of them, so they were all like teenagers when they went up against him. and now they're at 20s and 30s. They're still dealing with like the fame and everything that being the chosen ones came with, and some of them deal with it better than others. And our main character, Sloane, probably dealt with it the worst. Like, she's not a people person, I guess is the best way to describe it, and she doesn't like the attention that gets. She and Albie, who's another one of the chosen ones, went through something very traumatic together because they were actually more directly involved with the Dark One during this war than the rest of them. So they have like a shared trauma bond and everything. She's just not handling it well. So she doesn't like when people ask her questions about it and being treated differently when she goes out in public and all that stuff. So right now, I just got to the point where they had the funeral for the one chosen one that died. And Sloane is slowly going through, like, she requested all these top secret documents that's like the mixed media from the government to find out more about them. And like, she's like, it's my history. Like, I should have every right to know why they chose me, what their thinking was, like what went on. So you're getting like intermixed parts of that, and I think the story's really going to open up. I am a little concerned because when I went to put this in my Goodreads that I was reading it, it said Chosen Ones #1. So I didn't know this was like allegedly part of a series. I don't know if this will be like Stephenie Meyer's The Host, where like she wrote one book, it didn't do well, so she never wrote the rest of them. I don't know. But this was released in 2020 and there still isn't another book. So I'm hoping this doesn't end on like too much of a cliffhanger if she had intended on writing another book and didn't. So far it's very interesting. It's definitely holding my attention more than I was expecting it to. So I'm hoping it doesn't kind of drop off. There was a situation that happened with the government where they went to test something and it didn't go well, and it contributed to the death of the chosen one. It was not what caused the death, but the whole situation did. I don't know, Sloane's just, as our main character, she's not vibing with what the government's still trying to do, and doesn't understand why they're still trying to develop magic and all these like weapons and everything when allegedly the Dark One's gone. And as of this moment, I guess is gone. I don't know, but we'll see. I'm going to continue reading. I am going to see Deadpool and Wolverine today, so I do have to get ready for that in a little bit. But I'm hoping I can finish this book out at some point today, maybe a little bit later today into the evening, so that I can finish up this vlog. And again, hoping it doesn't end on a cliffhanger or too much of a cliffhanger. So I will read more and update you all probably again, just because this book's a little bit more complex than the rest of them that I've been reading in this series, in this vlog. But I'll catch up later. So I just got to part 3 in the book. I have like, I think 30% of the book left to read. And I think now is when we're going to really kind of get into the action part of it. Like, not much has happened action-wise since we last spoke. Things have happened, but it's just been building the story and understanding more about Sloane and why she is the way she is, and if she's going to be capable of helping with the situation that they're in. And her, I'm still not 100% sure what's going on, and she's not either, with her and like this magical device thing. I don't know what I think they called them artifacts that she was paired with. Like I talked about earlier, they all of the chosen ones had an artifact that was supposed to help them in this war. I think that's going to be something pretty big. I don't know, because they keep bringing it up. It's been like a thorn in her side, but at the same time, like, I think she bonded with it so much that it's a part of her now, and even if she doesn't want it to be. I don't really know how to explain it. She's painting a beautiful world. Like, Veronica Roth's writing in this book is phenomenal. Like, I can see the world that she's explaining and everything. It's Chicago, but like future Chicago. I believe this is taking place, like this takes place in like the 2000s, but, and I've been to Chicago, so I can, and the area that they're actually talking about was where I stayed when I was in Chicago. So a lot of that, like, I can visualize pretty easily, but like, just some of the other stuff in the way that she's describing, like the buildings that they're inside of and all of that and just what's going on, I'm really able to visualize it. But regardless, there is like a magical element to it now, more so than there was before. And that's interesting. But like I said, not much action-wise has happened. I'm hoping part 3 is a little bit more fast-paced. Not that this book's dragging, but I feel like it probably could have been a little bit shorter than it is. However, it was supposed to be the first book in a series, according to Goodreads, so we all know how that is, especially with fantasy novels, you have to do all that world building. So that could explain why there's just so much detail in that aspect of it. But we'll see. Again, I think I'm also afraid to finish this book just because I don't know if it's going to end on a cliffhanger, and I don't know if she's going to write another book. Stay tuned for that. I'm going to try to just sit down and finish out the last 140 pages, 130 some pages, and then we'll wrap up this vlog. Okay, everyone, time to wrap up this vlog. I did notice the other day when I was stacking these books on the counter that they're all blue. So not only was this a reading basically the oldest books on my TBR, but also reading blue books. So we'll start with the one I just finished, which was Chosen Ones by Veronica Roth. This was it was fantasy, more so than dystopian, and it was about these chosen ones. There were 5 of them from Earth that were prophesized to potentially be the person that would defeat the Dark One. Very similar to like Harry Potter and how like there was a prophecy that he was going to be the one to defeat Voldemort. I don't know. But anyway, there were 5 of them in here. We follow them 10 years after the defeat of the Dark One, and one of them ends up dying, and after that happens, there's like, I can't really say exactly what happens because it's not in the flap and it's a big part of the book, but what I will say without giving too much away is that they discover like a bigger plot at play and like deeper meanings to what was going on. And this book plays a lot with the multiverse. That's just what I'll say there. This was supposed to be a series. I just Googled it, and I don't think we're going to get another book because this is like 4 years old. I would think she would have plans for another book by now. So it ended enough that it can be a standalone, but there were still some things at the end that didn't get answered, which I guess I'll just have to deal with. So, but the main point of this book was answered. I gave this a 4-star. I really did enjoy it. Like the second half of the book was like very fast paced. It took a while to get into it. For some reason in my mind, I was like, I'm just probably not going to like this. So I think like going into the book thinking that kind of, it made me a little slower at the beginning with it, I think. But I really did enjoy this. I liked the characters. I didn't like Sloane too much at first, but I did grow to like her throughout the book as she grew as a character. And like the whole twist and everything in here and how it all came together was really good. So that was a 4-star read. Before that, I read Love It's Complicated by Janine Collette. And this book was okay. It wasn't a trope or like a setup for a love story, a romance that I would have probably reached for on my own, because it was single mom, still has the ex-husband in her life. There was a little bit of a trope that I'm not a huge fan of that does kind of allude to on the back, which is the cheating trope. And that was something that like was a big issue at the beginning, but it ended up being like a cute story. I liked the characters, but there were parts of the book that I was just not a huge fan of. So I ended up giving this, I think 3 stars, 2.75 or 3 stars, because it just wasn't my cup of tea, but I didn't hate it. But the family dynamics in here were not my favorite, and the tropes just weren't for me. Before that, I picked up When I'm Dead by Hannah Morrissey. This was a thriller about a medical examiner and her husband who is like a homicide detective in this town that like a lot of bad things happen in. And at the beginning, they're called away to a murder scene for their daughter's best friend. And then that night, their daughter goes missing. This book was also kind of like a 2.753 for me. I'm not exactly sure how I landed on it because I saw the culprit a mile off. I knew who they were searching for the whole time. And the twist at the end was just kind of, I don't want to say the twist, the reasoning behind why this person did what they did was kind of out of left field. So it wasn't like a very enjoyable book for me. Again, I think I said in the vlog earlier that I was pretty sure I knew who it was going to be at the end, and I was right. And the reasoning was just kind of like, it just felt like the author pulled it out of nowhere. It was kind of there, but not enough for me to be like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. So not the greatest thriller, but I didn't hate it. It did have a lot of like morbid stuff in it. It was darker than a lot of the thrillers that I read. And that kind of stuff bothers me. Like, I don't like to even watch, like, bones and stuff because I don't like watching the autopsies and them playing with people's, like, insides. I don't like that. And that was explained a bit in here. Obviously, she's a ME, so that's going to be explained. But that kind of stuff bothers me. I don't know why. I mean, I can read a Stephen King book and it doesn't bother me, but that like deep discussions of how they autopsy bodies really bothers me. So that was that one. And I started the vlog by finishing off the Shatter Me series by Tahar Mafi with Imagine Me. And this book started off a little chaotic, but I did like how it wrapped up at the end. However, I feel like it literally was build up, and then like this was the action part of the book. So it was more about like the relationships within the characters and all of that. And there were a few plot holes and stuff in here that I didn't love, but I still really like these characters. I like what she did with this series. It was like a 4-star series for me. This was like a 4.25 just because I did like how she wrapped up the stories at the end. Finally done with Shatter Me. I say finally, but I didn't start it that long ago. So those were the 4 books I read during this vlog. I'm happy to have gotten those books off of my TBR because they are some of the oldest books, if not the oldest books on my TBR. And I did enjoy them. Especially like the Chosen ones. I feel like I've had that sitting on my TBR for a year now, and I really did enjoy that book. I liked the story. I feel accomplished getting those books read. If you've made it this far, thanks so much for watching, and let me know in the comments if you've read any of these books, if any of them, what you thought about them, if you've read them. That's the end of this vlog, and I hope to see you all in the next one.